Junkie Nation, what's going on? Gorgeous George and Goes are back with another superstar from the sport of mixed martial arts. Today, Randy Couture, who needs no introduction, joins us here on the hotline. Of course, working for the PFL, calling their fights. It's playoff season, Randy. This is kind of like, in all the other sports, where we now separate the regular season from the playoffs, and that's what the PFL's kind of created these last few years. What have you noticed now that they've done this a few years now, that you've actually enjoyed differentiating the regular season and the playoffs? Is it as simple as the intensity even rises? What have you noticed?
I think that's absolutely one layer of that. As we move into the playoffs and the championship view really becomes clear. The stakes go up, and these guys turn it up. Obviously, they're one match away from being in the finals and a shot at that shiny belt and $1 million check. So there's no way the intensity can't go up in that circumstance. It's interesting, I think, how during the regular season, depending on how things unfold and how these guys get matched up, and some of the intensity and some of the things that happen in the regular season, then of course we know who advances, and then the playoffs become even more critical. And there's no way that doesn't enter these guys' minds. They know what's at stake.
Yeah, and you know what the cool thing about it is, like we've stated, since this started years ago, you win and you're in. You know what I mean? There's no sitting around going, well, now what? What if next week so-and-so impresses, and steals the show, or maybe talks a good game behind the mic. Maybe the champ might want to fight him and pay-per-view points. There's none of that. Just win and you're in.
Yeah, absolute meritocracy, and your destiny is in your own hands. It's up to you to go out there and let it hang out, do what you have to do to try and get those finishes and score those bonus points. The bonus points in the playoffs they're not critical. It doesn't matter. There are no bonus points on the line. It's literally win or go home.
Randy, we were messing around with Josh Silvera. Boy, that guy's actually pretty cool, man. We had a good conversation, and at the end, I told him, "Hey, bro, who wins in this street fight? And let's see if you can guess the theme." He guessed the theme. You're going to guess it too. But I go, here we go. I go, Velasquez, Bader, Henderson, Silvera, and Dalloway are in a bar. And there's 5 other guys, Cormier, Couture, Munoz, Hendricks, and King Mo. They're on the other side. So he guessed the theme, OSU versus ASU. But he says the ASU guys, they just got too much weaponry on their side. Campaign for your side, man. What do you think? And what I'm getting at mostly is these schools have just delivered so many great fighters to our sport.
Yeah, they have. Obviously, mine and Cormier and Johnny Hendricks, a bunch of us came out of that Oklahoma State camp and Arizona State. We had a solid rivalry in wrestling, and certainly a lot of guys from the Arizona State area have forayed into mixed martial arts as well. And I think in many ways, MMA has become the professional outlet for amateur wrestlers, certainly for collegiate wrestlers, and I think a bunch of our Olympians as well. Quickly delineated the theme there as you made your teams. That's funny. That would be fun. That'd be a hell of a practice room. I'll tell you what, you could sell popcorn to that training session.
Well, that's what I told Josh. I said, dude, make this a pay-per-view. I'll pay for this pay-per-view right now to see you guys. We'll use the glass bottles, the ones that you guys use in Hollywood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's fine. We'll do it real bar style, and then those breakaway chairs. I'd love to see that, man. That'd be fun.
Old school.
Mm-hmm. Didn't we get a piece of that, George, and King of Queens? We kind of got a little bit of it, right?
We did.
Hendo. It was a little.
Who are you aiming for, by the way?
Kevin got to be kind of the guy that created at least one of those episodes in a season, and that was the episode that he wanted to create. Obviously, he's a huge fan of MMA, so pulling me and Hendo and Rampage and Trig in was a lot of fun. It was a fun episode.
If that silly fight did break out, who are you going after and who are you avoiding? The other side remembers Velasquez, Bader, Dan Henderson, Silvera, and Dalloway.
Well, I'm going to avoid Dan Henderson. You kidding me? I don't think anybody wants that H-bomb dropped on him.
The H-bomb, huh? Okay.
He's the first guy to knock me on my ass. That's the truth of the matter. And, I got him a time or two as well. So we had a long-standing friendship from the national team and Open Team Quest together. Me, Matt, Danny, and Robert Fallis founded that gym, and the plethora of guys that came out of that place is ridiculous. I mean, it was an amazing place. But Danny's the guy I'm going to avoid.
And in between, then you guys created Raw, right? Back in the day.
Back in the early days, Rico Chiapparelli had the idea to create Real American Wrestling and pull some of the best wrestlers from the national team and the collegiate ranks and create an MMA team that came from that background. And we ended up getting challenged because of the name, because Raw was already taken by the WWE.
Right.
So we had to change it to, I think we ended up going with R2 or something like that. But it was a fun era, and certainly how I launched my career. Chiapparelli helped me get into that first UFC, and Danny, went down to Brazil to jungle fights down there. Tom Erickson was a guy that was part of the team back then.
Big cat.
Frank Trigg, Dennis Hall, Matt Lindland. I mean, it was all a bunch of very, very good wrestlers.
In a way, I'm sorry to cut you off, sir. In a way, can't we almost credit Rico? I don't know what your relationship is with him, but from what I heard, this guy wrestled at Iowa, but he also had a modeling career. And then overseas, apparently, when he did do some modeling, either he versed himself or someone did it for him in terms of those, I think we call them perpetuary rights or something like that, rights in preparation, and that transferred over to you guys, who I guess your rights and image, we know that the UFC kind of owns a lot of you going forward, but I heard he was the one that kind of alerted some of you guys to some of those rights and holding on to some of those rights. I'm sorry to really
I don't remember having that conversation with Rico or Lou, because Lou Chiapparelli was kind of the nuts and bolts guy of that relationship. He was the one doing the negotiating with and dealing with the contracts. Rico was more the trainer. He was the wizard. He was this funk master from Iowa. He was, I think, a 3-time national champ for the Hawkeyes. He had a funky style, a la Ben Askren, very Ben Askren-esque, got in these weird Gumby positions, and you never knew who had who until that guy was on his back and getting pinned. It was a pretty amazing style. But he had a unique insight in how to fashion wrestlers and fit wrestling situations and circumstances into that cage. He understood how jiu-jitsu worked as well. So he was a wealth of knowledge early in my career for sure. But I don't think I ever had a talk with Lou about the business side of things. We signed those contracts and with SEG, and we ended up in a big title, a rhubarb over the contract with Bob Meyerowitz and company when they owned it. I had just signed with new management when Dana White and company bought the brand and started Zuffa. And those were the guys, Peter Levin and Jeremy Lappin from Battle Management, were the guys that educated me on what an ancillary right was and how horrible this contract was that they were wanting me to sign as the heavyweight champion. And they were the ones that educated me on that and helped me to kind of stand up and try and keep control of my ancillary rights in a lot of those categories.
Isn't it funny how 25 years later, another Extreme Couture heavyweight kind of stood up for himself and then wound up getting, this amazing deal with PFL in 2024 for MMA, and then the boxing match since the last time we spoke. Now it's official. He's boxing Tyson Fury. Did he pick your brain a lot? Did he know about the history of how you stood up for yourself back in the day? And
I think he's aware of that history, but and everybody assumes that him and I had long conversations about my perspective and what was going on in 06, 07, 05, 06, 07, that ultimately led to my rhubarbs with Dana and Zuffa. But we actually never talked. I talked to Eric, obviously, who's Francis's head trainer and head coach. And obviously Eric was around here back then, so he knew firsthand what was going on. But I've actually never talked to Francis about that. Francis has got a good head on his shoulders. I was very impressed with him and his contributions to all the meetings in Saudi Arabia, talking about being the chairman of PFL Africa and all his vision and how he wants to create facilities and create opportunities for all those folks in Africa that grow up and are in the same boat that he was in, trying to find those opportunities. So I was very, very impressed with him. He's a very smart guy. He's not just a big beast of an athlete.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very proud of him as well. He stuck to his guns, and I hope he enjoys the fruits of all this, because he took a lot. You know, he took a lot of criticism, but now he looks like he gets the final say. Let me ask you about ESPN. You guys are going to be on ESPN on the 4th in San Antonio. Then you guys go to New York. Well, you guys have been on ESPN a lot this year.
Yeah.
What has been your feedback in terms of, because we're out of the pandemic, all sports are out there, so it's not like, they're looking for time to fill. What have you heard that they've been enjoying about PFL, that you guys are now pretty much featured on ESPN quite a bit?
Yeah, ratings. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business, and it still boils down to ratings. And the PFL fights and the shows have been getting very, very good ratings. And I think that's why they keep rolling us into big ESPN, not just ESPN Plus or ESPN2 this season. So, and boy, have the fighters stepped up and lived up to that. The regular season was ridiculous. Some huge upsets, some fights that happened that you could have never called. I mean, really, really intense and really fun. It was a really fun season.
Randy, of the fighters that are back again for this season, who do you think has made the biggest strides? Who's changed the most from last year?
Gosh, well, you mentioned, before we started, Josh Silveira, and you just talked to Josh, and look how far Josh has come in 2 years. I think he's just coming into his own and really kind of figuring out who he is and how he fits into this sport. Obviously, he's grown up in the environment. His wrestling background is very, very solid at Arizona State. Made it through the Challenger all the way to the finals last year and came up a little short. And he's just been a man on a mission this season. I've been very, very impressed with him. Chris Wade getting a nod and filling in the spot for Movlid Habalayev, who injured himself and couldn't go into the playoffs. And Chris, if you look at him in all the 5 seasons, moving down from 155 to 45 to keep himself in the PFL. And he just keeps refining and keeps getting better tactically and technically. He implements his wrestling pedigree very, very well. He was a state champion in New York, which is a great wrestling state. He implements that into his fighting very, very good. And could he make 45? And boy, he settled right in there. He looks great at that weight. I think he still brings some of the power that he had at 55. He's got a great gas tank, and he's done a great job. So I'm happy that, he did everything right in the regular season. And then Jesus Pinedo comes in, drops the knee on Brendan Loughnane, scores 6 quick points, and takes him out of the playoff picture after he got a second-round finish and did what he needed to do to secure a playoff spot. So I don't think anybody could have anticipated that. And I'm sure Chris was flabbergasted when that went down, like all of us, like, what the heck just happened? But I'm glad to see him get the nod and get back in there, because he's been on a mission and really seen him make the changes. And with that being said, he had a big match with Bubba Jenkins 2 seasons ago. And he out-wrestled Bubba Jenkins, a Division I national champion for Arizona State. And I think everybody was a little surprised by that, including Bubba Jenkins. And it was a humbling experience for Bubba. And consequently, I think we've seen Bubba Jenkins come back humbled, hardworking, done the work with Dewey Cooper. He's letting his hands go and being a much more well-rounded fighter and not just a one-trick pony. He's very good at taking guys down and smothering them, but he kind of let a bunch of the rest of his game go to the wayside just to win that way. And I think we're seeing a much more exciting Bubba Jenkins, and he's going to be tough to beat this season.
I can't imagine the level of stress that goes into this whole season, playoffs, all that for these fighters, because essentially it's one giant camp, right? So yeah. I was kind of talking about this earlier in the day with another fighter, and we were talking about the stresses of the regular season, right? Mm-hmm. And everything you have to go through to hope that you can make it to the playoffs.
Yep.
But then once you get to the playoffs, it's not like you can go, well, that was done, right? Like, now it's a whole new stress. There's a lot of money on the line. Can you maybe talk about what you feel like the mentality is for the regular season, and then what happens in a fighter's mind come playoff time? How do you balance it all?
Yeah, I think you have to put it in proper perspective or frame, put the proper frame around that and keep it in perspective. Take it one fight at a time. go out and do your job. Not let the nerves and the extraneous stuff get in your head, because if it does, it'll shut you down, and nothing will shut you down quicker than that fear of failing. So you have to develop those mental skills. I think you have to front load your camp. That first camp has to be a full camp and be in shape, and then try and do your best to be as aggressive as you can be to score those bonus points, but not put yourself out there in harm's way and get injured, because you're going to turn around and fight again in 7 or 8 weeks. You're literally signing up to fight 4 times in 8 months. I mean, that's a tall order. And so that you have to approach that appropriately. And I think a lot of marquee fighters are looking at the PFL and saying, wow, they're paying well. I'm going to jump over there. I don't think there's anybody in that league that can hang with me. And they are sorely mistaken. We've seen it time and time again. There's a lot of very tough cats in the PFL. You know, ask Anthony Pettis or Fabricio Verdum, and I mean, go on down the list. Rory McDonald, a lot of marquee guys that I think thought they were just going to wade in and wade through everybody, and it was going to be an easy day, and it's not an easy day, and I think they all realize that now.
Can we still say that the free agency worked out for the PFL, even though some of the guys they wrote big checks for, like you said, maybe just got checked, came up short? Is it working in the sense that they created new stars from the guys that beat them? What do you think going forward? Is that still the recipe? Sign a few guys and see how it goes? Or do those guys have to come in and succeed because they are the big names, you know, the established names, the ones that ESPN wants to, I guess, promote?
Yeah. I mean, you really walk a fine line there, don't you? Those are marquee names. Those are guys that I think the average fan looking at it too expected them to come in and just blow through people. And obviously it didn't go that way for any of them. And I think that's a tribute to the format, a tribute to all the other countries that are involved in this format, and the level of athleticism in the sport of mixed martial arts right now is at an all-time high, I think, across the board. So yeah, I get it. I think at the end of the day, like I said, it is a business. You know, we are on ESPN. It's not like we have launched the pay-per-view model yet. Last year's final was a pay-per-view. You know, I didn't necessarily agree with that decision. I think we've been giving it away free on ESPN all the season, and then to turn around at the last second and do a pay-per-view for the final. I had several people text me about that, but that was a decision that was made well above me. I think the pay-per-view model will launch, and it will be a success because of the stars that we built, like the Kayla Harrisons and the Brendan Loughnane and on down the list, that have become much more popular and shown their abilities in the PFL cage, that later down the road in the pay-per-view model are going to do very, very well. Certainly Francis is going to show up there. I think that's where we'll see Kayla. Maybe that's where Kayla gets her rematch with Pacheco. I mean, who knows? But we're definitely taking the time through the season to build some stars, and you get to see some people's character, how they deal and face the adversity that this sport brings. And you get to see who you want to root for and who you want to root against in the season format too. I think those are all positive things that are affecting the ratings and why we're being put back on ESPN a lot more this season.
You strike me always as a guy that is happy for the success of the sport, and you being one of the early pioneers with, you know, decisions you made that may have affected the future generations. I know that there might be times where you're frustrated when you read a news story about the way fighters, you know, acting or portraying themselves. But then there's got to be times where you're smiling and you're happy for some of these people that can make careers out of it, make a lot of money. What are you more, frustrated or happy?
I'm happy.
For how things have
Absolutely.
unfolded?
I don't get frustrated often. There are some things in our sport, and I still think we have some things to improve. And, you know, fighter pay is one of the things we've already talked about here. But I think getting our fair shake in the marketplace, creating some transparency in our sport, because the promoters hold all the cards right now. And obviously I appreciate the way that the PFL is doing business, and they're creating their own transparency for the most part. But the sport in general, I think, needs some transparency so that we know exactly what these promoters are making off any given event. And then that'll give those fighters the opportunity to negotiate for their fair share of that pie and that cash is generated. And I think we're still stuck at about 13 to 15% of the cash that comes in from any single event going to the fighters on that card. I don't know how honestly, I'm not privy to the contracts that these fighters are under in the PFL and what they're getting paid. I'm not sure how that affects that percentage, but I know the numbers that I've seen crunched through the MMAFA and other sources as we try to get the Ollie Act amended and some of the other stuff I've been involved with in the last 8 years or so. Those were the numbers that came out, and I'm not sure if the PFL, calculating the PFL in those percentages has changed that at all, because obviously there's a whole bunch of the roster that's getting paid very, very well in the PFL. Probably many of them would have taken years, if at all, to get into the six figures that a lot of guys in the PFL are making. So that's, I think, another plus, certainly from the fighter's perspective. When your next fight is. You're not waiting for that phone to ring, but you also better figure out what you signed up for. You signed up for a lot of fights in 8 months, and how to manage that, keep your camps proper and take care of yourself and manage the injuries, but at the same time be in peak shape and ready to go out there every 8 weeks and get it done.
Yeah. See, I tend to be more of a bitter bastard sometimes. Like when I was younger, Magic Johnson signed a contract, $25 million for 25 years. So it was $1 million a year, and we all went, wow, right?
Yeah.
Happy for Magic Johnson. There's a guy named Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics that just signed for 5 years, $304 million, all of it guaranteed. All of it guaranteed.
Wow.
And then there's rumors of the Saudi leagues in soccer paying guys over 100 million euros to play their one season.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And I know that there's this money available for a lot of the MMA athletes.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like sometimes the MMA athletes need to be shaken and woken up, because they don't realize just how valuable that they are, you know, and how much more lucrative this could be for them. I know some of it takes collective bargaining, but so many athletes that just, whatever they decide, whatever someone else decides, I'm just here to fight. Oh man, no, be more into your brand, folks. I
agree with that statement 100%, George. And that's been the biggest issue with creating a fighters association, is to get certainly that top tier, that top 5% of the fighters that are making good money but they're signing those crappy contracts and signing their ancillary rights away. If we at the top demand some better treatment, demand some transparency, which is exactly what Francis tried to do with the UFC. He wanted some advocacy for the fighters. It wasn't about the money. The money they were throwing at him was as good as anybody's making in our sport right now. Was it boxing money? Absolutely not. But what's he going to make on this Tyson Fury fight? That's going to be interesting. Ask, why is Jake Paul, the mouth for MMA when he hasn't even fought in MMA yet? Because he brought in some MMA guys like Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren and Anderson Silva to do these thrillers. And those guys made more money from that one boxing match than they've ever made in MMA, which is ridiculous. And if it takes a guy like Jake Paul to shine a light on the disparaging difference in our sports and the issue in our sport, then I'll get behind that guy all day long. I'm not a fan of the trolling and the rhetoric, but he's backed it up. He's stepped in there. He's done the work. He's talented. He's got a great platform. And he's helping all of us as MMA fighters by shining a light on that and by poking Dana White in the chest the way he does.
Yeah. Bubba Jenkins says he's a friend of the Whitakers, the son and the Purnell, who's no longer with us. And I go, well, by coincidence, you're fighting in San Antonio where Pernell Whitaker challenged Julio Cesar Chavez. This was 30 years ago, Randy. Yeah. And Julio Cesar Chavez made $5 million and Pernell Whitaker made $2 million, which back then was a lot of money. But even now is a lot of money in combat sports, which we don't see those types of paydays as much in MMA, But 30 years have gone by since that fight. Cesar Chavez, by the way, was 87-0 going into that fight. Can you believe getting 87-0?
That is amazing. That is truly amazing.
Yeah. As always, sir, it's a pleasure and an honor having you on Junkie Radio. We always learn so much and cover so much, so we thank you for the time. And
thank you guys.
Good luck with everything on the Hollywood side. I know there's some stuff, stuck at a standstill there for the writers, the actors. We wish you the best there too. I know you got some big stuff coming out soon too.
I think it'll settle out. Absolutely. Obviously it always does. I'm not sure they're even talking yet, but at some point I think they'll get down to brass tacks and we'll get to the bottom of the issues there. Obviously the digital platforms are a huge piece of that puzzle, and getting residuals paid properly through the digital platforms is what a lot of this is about. The AI thing is another thing that It's bothering some actors and bothering some of the writers because they're using these algorithms that literally have every script ever written in these algorithms. So you feed your script through there and it compares and contrasts your script through AI with every other script that's in that same genre. And then it gives you ideas and ways to change your script to make it better. It's pretty interesting. But at the same time, if you're a writer, that's got to be a kind of a slap in the face that, you know, people are just going to start using AI to write scripts and take the creative element and the human element out of that process. So I think those are the two big sticking points in this strike. I think we'll get to the bottom of it for sure. You know, it is what it is. It's part of our society. You know, obviously unions and all that stuff were created for a reason because we needed them. I think some of them have gotten way too powerful and swing way too big a stick. It's not reasonable anymore. But at the end of the day, we still need them. And this is no different. So.
And we don't want to get you in trouble with SAG or anything. We'll edit out when you brought out the
I don't think
gun.
I'm saying anything inflammatory. You know.
No, but you brought out the guns, remember? And a little while ago, we were like, "Hey, you can't promote things here, Mr. Couture."
No, Expendables comes out on the 22nd of September. It hits the theaters. I don't think anything is going to stop that. Certainly not the strike. So, you know, it is what it is. I think hopefully it'll settle by then because there's a lot of people relying on you know, on that money, on having that job. So you don't want to see this drag out 6 months or 9 months. That's a lot of people out of work for a long time.
Hey, by the way, is forgetting a line or messing up a line almost as nerve-wracking as the first couple of times you fought? Do you have a good story to share in that regard, or have you always been pinpoint when delivering your lines?
That's the beauty of acting, right? I didn't like that take. Let's do it again. You don't get that opportunity in a real fight. So, I mean, you know, most scenes you're doing 6 to 8, sometimes 10 takes, and you're tweaking things, everything from camera speed and changing the angle to maybe shuffling the dialogue a little bit too. So you have to be flexible, be able to, you know your lines, know your cues. That's your castmates' lines as well, because when they say that, you got to say this, and, you know, all that fits together. So,
have you ever flubbed your lines pretty bad?
I've flubbed up some lines here and there for sure. The first thing I did wrong was, and this was Cradle to the Grave, my very first film, I had a fight scene with Jet Li. And I'm supposed to throw a right hand right at him. And then, you know, his whole stick in the movies, he's got his hand in his pocket. He doesn't want to fight anybody. And he's just supposed to dodge anything I throw at him. Well, I throw this right hand. Thankfully, I didn't hit him in the face, but I ran him over. I mean, he did not see it coming. I was supposed to wind up and throw a big haymaker that he could get out of the way of. I'm a fighter. That's not what we do. I literally just launched it right from my cheek. I didn't hit him in the face, but I definitely ran him over in the cage. And the director went apeshit. I was like, dude, I'm sorry. He was fine. And he thought it was funny. But that was a big faux pas for me, for sure. And learning, you know, the difference between a movie punch and a real punch, and all that stunt stuff, that was a big learning curve for me.
I'm glad I asked that. I got this Bell's palsy, and you just made me laugh. I haven't laughed much in the last few months, but I literally cracked up at that, man. The director got mad at you. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy.
Just ran over the star of the movie.
Thanks for sharing that. We'll talk soon, all right? Take care.
Yeah, you guys be well. Thanks for having me on.